Welcome to Learning Module W2B, Week 2B, and we're going to talk about strategy and operations and supply chain management in this module, building on our last lecture, which was strategy primer, overall business strategy primer. This will address the functional area of OSCM. So a few objectives. One is to be able to explain key ideas surrounding OSCM strategies, including the concepts of structural and infrastructural decisions that are made in the OSCM area, typical and common to the OSCM area. The concept of customer value, and we'll look at a value index and how value could be computed and structured, and basically taking some ambiguous information and saying, I can make this mathematical and find a decision support tool. We'll look at the 4 OSCM performance dimensions that are common for us, OSCM performance dimensions that are commonly considered in the strategy area. And we'll look at the trade-offs of those dimensions, and that as we make decisions, we have to realize that we can't do everything, and that when we choose to commit to one or two of the performance dimensions, we're also choosing probably to neglect others. And last, we'll look at the concept of order winners and qualifiers and understand that. So this slide should be familiar to you. We looked at it during the strategy primer, the business level strategy primer. And again, we're just going to focus now on operations and supply chain as a functional area of the business, a critical and important functional area of the business, and how OSCM basically can fit into the overall strategic framework of a company. So here is a little definition for you. So operations and supply chain strategy, it's basically a functional strategy that indicates how those structural and infrastructural elements that we've talked about with the operations and supply chain areas will be acquired and developed to support the overall business. So it means we'll look at the structural and infrastructural elements within the context of our functional area now. 3 primary objectives of OSCM strategy. One is to help management choose the right mix of those structural and infrastructural elements. Basically, there's always trade-offs, and when we decide how we're going to approach the structural and infrastructural side, we're purchasing computer applications, we're making capacity decisions, we're deciding on policies, procedures, etc. And it's very complex, so we're trying to get the mix right. And it's an ever-moving target. It doesn't stop and stay the same. We're always thinking of how to improve the company, and that affects structural and infrastructural elements. So also, number 2 would be ensuring that the firm's structural and infrastructural choices are strategically aligned. So if we say we have a high-level strategic objective for the corporation, then it's incumbent on those functional areas to say, how do I align to that? Do I need new systems? Do I need new people? Do I need more capacity? Do we need to do something with the supply chain? What are all the things that we have to do to align to the corporate strategy and align all those elements? Last, we need to support the development of core competencies. So when we commit to a strategy and we say we're going to move into a product group or move into a new market or improve our quality, reduce our costs, all these different things that companies work on all the time, when those become strategic initiatives, they stand out from the clutter of all the different things we could be talking about and working on. And when they become strategic, it's incumbent on us to look in the functional area of the business and say, are there core competencies that I should have to support this strategic initiative? Let's say, for example, that a company says, we want to have a much bigger web presence and sell directly to customers or consumers or B2B, that we need a digital engagement with our customers. Well, some part of the company, and it could be in the information systems group, or it could be in the functional area of marketing or so forth, would need to be able to develop a core competency, let's say potentially. You could outsource it all too, but might develop a core competency in web design and in e-commerce so that we become good at this, right? Amazon for example, is unbelievably good at that. It is a core competency of theirs, how to manage an electronic catalog and all the aspects of managing an electronic catalog and web business, which are numerous, that they've learned to excel in many, many of those attributes as core competencies now. So it's structural decision categories. So when we look at operations, these are common structural decision categories. How much capacity do we need? The amount of capacity, the type of capacity, when we add capacity or take capacity offline and sell capacity, for example. When do we need it? How much do we need? And where do we need it? The facilities is tied, of course, to the capacity discussion. Where do we locate our facilities? Do we need new facilities? If we're expanding overseas, are we going to produce through a third party and outsource that? Or are we going to build our own facilities? Or are we going to have a joint venture where we work with a local company? All these types of decisions impact the facilities decisions. Will we use warehouses, distribution hubs, and the size, location, and degree of specialization? All facilities, of course, are not created equal. They can be very specialized. And last, the technology is in the structural decision area. So we have certain manufacturing and service processes. What technologies support those? If we're making printed circuit boards for cell phones, that's a certain technology, mass production of electronics. If we're in low volume production of printed circuit boards, it's a completely different technology. To be able to build maybe low volume custom runs of 1,000 or 10,000 or 100 pieces of something is very different than if you're making an iPhone component, for example. Material handling equipment and transportation equipment, information systems, all of these areas become very specialized when we think about structural decisions. Infrastructural decisions, and again, infrastructural is the soft side of the business, or it's the softer side of the business at least. What about the organization? How many people of all different job descriptions need to be employed by our company? What type of experience do they need to have? What kind of progression do they have opportunity-wise in their career? Do we offer training? How do we reward these people and motivate them in different ways? Through great management techniques, through financial incentives, through all sorts of different means and psychological tools, right? Workforce decisions. So all those things that come to us having the right people, the best possible people, which is an increasingly, probably never-ending area of focus for companies. Lee Iacocca once said, we have to have the right people because that's all we have here is people at the end of the day. And that adages like that tend to be shown true over and over and over again. Sourcing and purchasing. So, how do we decide on our supply strategy and segment our suppliers and have the best suppliers, better suppliers than our competitors when it comes to meeting our strategic objectives? And how we select and measure performance and do development activities with those suppliers to make them better from year to year, month to month is a very important strategic area for many businesses. Planning and control is really the nuts and bolts operation stuff that's the day-to-day keep us running. Forecasting so that we have an idea what we're going to build and we can lay out a master production schedule that we think matches to demand. So it's demand management. And doing all of the tactical planning that says, how many of different parts do we need to have arrive at which times and which days by doing what's called MRP, Materials Requirements Planning. Inventory management, how much stock do we choose to hold and why, and what quantities, when does it become obsolete, how do we manage our inventory through push-based systems or pull-based systems, production planning and control. So all of those really tactical decisions come together to impact achieving our strategy. The business processes and quality management, you'll always hear me stress the importance of process and encourage all my students to be process oriented. When you are providing something of strategic value through your individual work or your department's work, it's important to be tuned into what that is and why it matters. And when we understand our processes and we map them out and we're clear about what we're doing, we avoid wasteful processes. We can often turn a low-quality process into a high-quality process. We can use tools that are well-developed and available to us to improve the quality of our process through quality management. So business process and quality management is a huge area of focus in operations. And last, product and service development. So when we launch a product, if we've done a good job, we not only have connected to what the consumer values, and probably through our marketing function and focus groups and surveys and so forth, really hopefully connected well early in the product development process to make sure that when we do develop a new product that it meets the needs of the customer. But also, as a part of that, it's not just knowing what the customer wants, it's having a systematic way through our infrastructure to basically do a great job of product development. This means hitting our budgets, and that means time budgets, being on time, and it means the financial budgets, being within finance. So the quality, cost, timing type thing that every product development has to have, it comes together through this. The other thing we see with great infrastructural capabilities is that companies design products that they can build. And often you'll hear about cases of things gone wrong where the quality wasn't right in something. And maybe the Samsung phone that blows up in your pocket is a good example. Something failed during the process so that either it wasn't manufactured properly. I don't know the story yet. I don't know if it's been root caused and actually diagnosed, but something was wrong in the design or the testing or the consistency of the build. These are the kind of things that great companies will figure out early, and will connect design to validation so that when we set specifications for a product that we clearly basically prove as we go that we can build this, our suppliers are capable, we are capable. When the rubber hits the road and we start building these, we'll have a good event. And Samsung's no exception. They just had a real expensive problem here once, but over the years they've been excellent, right? It shows how important it is to maintain those capabilities. So the concept of customer value, we will use in this course what's called a value index. We'll develop a value index and calculate it. And it basically, the idea of an index means it's a relative measure. So whenever you see the word index, it means you need to compare the number, the numerical value, with something comparable to give it meaning. So if we look at the S&P 500, a financial index, if you just grab a number out of the air and say on a certain date this was the index, it doesn't mean anything. If you connect it to the day before and the day after, it starts to take on meaning. When you connect it over years and years, you get even a whole another level of understanding of meaning. But a single point doesn't mean much with an index. It doesn't really mean anything. A measure that uses the performance and importance scores for various dimensions of performance for an item or service to calculate a score that indicates the overall value of an item or a service to a customer. And I will show you in a simple diagram exactly what that means in a moment here. So basically the formula is, the value index is the sum of the importance and the performance of different attributes of a product. And we are going to look at how that comes together. So here is an example out of your textbooks. John wants to buy a tablet PC to use for his school assignments, decides to evaluate the choices based on 4 dimensions. For you, it might be 4 completely different dimensions, but for John, it's performance quality, delivery speed, after-sales support, and cost. He decided those 4 things would help him make a choice between 2 different products. The campus store carries 2 different tablet PCs. One's made by Wolfbite Computers, one by Dole Microsystems. So we're going to calculate a value index for each and determine which provides the greater value. So here is the simple grid. If we say these are the 4 performance dimensions that matter to John: performance, quality, delivery speed, after-sales support, and cost, and this represents their relative importance to each other, the higher numbers being more important. So John is most concerned with cost, next with quality, then with after-sales support, and he's least concerned with speed. But that speed is on this list, just to be clear, means it matters to him. There's lots of other decision dimensions that are not on this list because he's saying they're less than a 1. They don't really matter much at all to him. Delivery speed still matters to John, just not as much as the others. So then John has basically rated the performance. So this is the importance. Now the performance for those 2 different options. And he's given them, looks like, a scale from 1 to 5 performance on each of those. And the way that we would calculate then a value index is to multiply the importance times the performance for each attribute for the 2 different firms. So 3 times 4 would be 12, 1 times 3, 2 times 4, and 4 times 2. If I add that up, it's 31. Okay, 3 times 4 plus 1 times 3 plus 2 times 4 plus 4 times 2. 31 for wolf bite. We'd do the same for Dole, and it would be 3 times 3 plus 1 times 5 plus 2 times 2 plus 4 times 4. And the total of that is 34. So Dole is the better value for John. John should buy the Dole Microsystems computer as long as he did a good job of picking the dimensions and weighting the importance of the dimensions. John should now be able to make a better decision, where it was a little bit ambiguous and difficult for him. Okay, the concept of OSCM performance dimensions. So there are 4 dimensions of OSCM performance that are commonly considered and examined by businesses. One, the first, is cost, being able to offer a product or service at a lower price than your competitors. The second is quality, being able to offer a product at a higher quality than your competitors. Time, being able to offer a product in less time than your competitors. And flexibility, being able to quickly accommodate product and process changes more quickly than your competitors. I need to reword that slide, typo. Okay, the quality dimension example is Toyota that I chose. So, if you think about Toyota, they've differentiated themselves for many, many years on the basis of quality. And there's 3 different types of quality that we would typically consider. One is performance quality. That's the basic operating characteristics. So does the car do, in Toyota's case, what it should do? Does the radio work? Is the handling good? Is the engine properly responsive and the drivetrain properly responsive? Is the car quiet and free from excessive wind noise? How does the car actually perform, right, along all those characteristics that the customer expects? Number 2 is conformance quality. That basically addresses whether a product conforms to its specifications. And it's largely technical and engineering driven type of conformance. So we always issue specifications for processes and for parts. Can we operate in control and in conformance with those specifications? Next is reliability quality, and that's really basically the long-term capability of a product to work without unplanned and unexpected maintenance. The time dimension of competing in operations, one is delivery speed and the other is delivery reliability. Delivery speed refers to how quickly the operations or supply chain can fulfill a need once it's been identified. How long does that take? And number 2 is the delivery reliability, and that just means, do we do what we say we will do when it comes to delivery? When we promise, does it happen? The cost dimensions I gave just for an example for you could be Southwest Airlines. They have found a formula and a way of working that basically keeps their costs very low. They have reasonable labor costs, and they found ways to hedge sometimes petrol and so forth, and their policies keep their costs a little lower than their competitors. But we would typically look at all four of these dimensions, which is what is our labor, what is our material cost, what do we put into engineering, and what are our quality related costs when we think about that cost dimension. Flexibility dimension, an example could be Dell. We've talked about them in the class before. So one attribute of flexibility to consider is the mix. So the ability to produce a wide range of products and services, mix flexibility. Can I build 4 different types of washing machines down one assembly line, 5 different types of cars down one assembly line, 3 different iPhones on one assembly line? So the more that I have that ability to basically have mix flexibility, the more I can get out of my assets as the mix changes. I don't necessarily have to invest money and be crippled for a while or making adaptations or investments when the mix changes. Changeover flexibility refers to the ability to basically produce a new product without a lot of delay. Fast changeovers are a part and an attribute of lean production. We'll talk about lean near the end of the course. And to be able to basically say what used to take 4 hours to change from building product A to product B now only takes us 5 minutes or 30 minutes or 12 minutes or whatever it might be. So our assets can be quickly redeployed to build a different product. Volume flexibility, that's basically the ability to raise and lower output levels with demand and not run at a fixed speed. So the more that we make our labor in our plant cross-trained and redeployable and able to move from line A to line B, and the more that we make our lines basically able to run at different cycle times, so that we can slow down a line, and a line that can build anywhere from 60 pieces per minute to 200 pieces per minute, or 60 per hour to 200 per hour, for example, shows a lot of volume flexibility when we can speed up and slow down our lines. The trade-offs among those performance dimensions are very important to understand, because if you're clicking through those and you're reading about it, it's very easy to say, well, I'll just be good at all these. These all matter. We need to have the lowest cost. We need to have flexibility and meet the custom demands of our consumers. We need to have the highest quality and so forth. So what most companies find is if we try to do everything, we do nothing, and we don't excel and differentiate ourselves. We just kind of try to do it all and fail at most of it. So it's very important in strategy to decide what we're not going to do. It's almost harder than deciding what we are going to do. So remember, if strategy is the how, we have all these possible things that can support obtaining the higher level business strategy. And one of the hardest things to do as a management team or as a consultant is to figure out which of all those wonderful ideas we're going to table and put aside, because we need to focus. And there's always trade-offs that actually help us to put things aside. It's very difficult to excel at all 4 performance dimensions. Some common conflicts include having the lowest cost and the highest quality. Very difficult, very difficult. Having the lowest cost and the most flexibility. Again, it's not impossible, but it's very difficult, usually a trade-off. Having very reliable delivery versus being extremely flexible. Why is that? Because flexibility implies that we're able to produce lots of different types of components and different speeds and so forth. And reliability is often easier achieved with standard parts that we can inventory and have buffers and be ready to fulfill quickly. So those are at odds in many cases. Conformance quality versus product flexibility. So many times the more flexible we make a system, complexity always drives risk, and complexity makes quality a challenge from a risk point of view. So having good conformance quality and a highly flexible system is a challenge. It's not impossible. It's a challenge. It just means it's going to be a steeper hill to climb. Let's talk about the concept of order winners and order qualifiers. So, a performance dimension that differentiates a company's product or services from its competitors, that basically pulls people in to buy the product. And we all know as consumers there are certain things that we say, you know what, I really love the way some attribute about a product, or a number of attributes about a product, and that's why I bought that product. Those are order winners. Order qualifiers would be a minimum level of performance that allows us to consider that product at all. If companies don't meet the order qualifier level, it means we would not consider working with them. So let's take a little look here at a picture. So the reason for this picture is to give an example of a restaurant that's very clean and organized, well lit, lots of open capacity, and that most people would probably say that meets my qualifier, that I would be willing to eat there. This other picture, and maybe I can find a dirtier one, but is intended to show a place where if you walked in and said, my gosh, there's dirty stuff all over the tables, the floor looks dirty, it's not well lit, dingy walls and drapes, I don't know if this restaurant meets my minimum threshold. Maybe nothing else matters, right, if they don't pass the order qualifier level. So here's another one for you just to ponder. How does a hairstylist meet your criteria for order qualifier and order winner? Is it pricing based for you to consider working with them? Is it their work and you're less sensitive to price? So all of these dimensions are different for all different consumers and consumer groups, right? So we all use these concepts of order qualifiers and order winners all the time when we buy. Here's an example, and it's our last slide, of two chemical suppliers and 4 criteria, and one of those criteria has an important order qualifier. It is the purity of the chemicals have to be 99%. And there are 3 other performance dimensions listed here. So for supplier A, they meet and exceed the 99% pure level. They have a long lead time, I guess, 3 days for delivery time, and they cost $30 per liter compared to $20 for a competitor. And they're able to be fairly flexible. They can deliver in small quantities. The other competitor does not meet the 99% pure threshold. However, they are more competitive in delivery time and in cost, and they're not as competitive for the minimum order. So what you could ask yourself from this is, what would I do? Which supplier would I select based on the above chart? Well, based on the above chart, you've already said you will not consider doing business with supplier B because they haven't met your order qualifier level of purity. What does a supplier need to do to compete? They've got to basically bring this quality up here. Bring this up, and they would be meeting this level, meeting at least the minimum here, and winning in 2 out of the other 3. They would at least be competitive then. At least be competitive. If they also became a little bit more flexible in their orders, then they're probably in an order winner situation. What can A do to improve its position? Well, they're weak here in 2 of the dimensions. If they could improve their performance on delivery time, delivery speed, and if they could do something with their price, any combination of those would probably better secure their position, right? Secure their competitive position. That is our lecture on OSCM strategy. I hope it was helped you to connect how a functional area strategy can connect and support and align to the business level strategy through managing those infrastructure and structural elements. and also by looking at those 4 dimensions that are very common to OSCM strategy, and the concept of order qualifiers and order winners in how we basically can generate value and calculate value and start looking at the total value of something from a decision sciences point of view as something less nebulous and more that we can put our hands on by turning it into numbers. That ends our discussion on OSCM strategy.